1, 2, is this on?
The lasting impression of a wrestling match is typically the finish, so if things go wrong or the ending falls flat, then it can overshadow how good the match truly was. We'll look at examples of this occurring today, as we list 10 matches that started great, but ended terribly. In Your House Mind Games is remembered for its exceptional main event, where Mankind challenged Shawn Michaels for the WWF Championship. The Philadelphia crowd was hot for the whole match, and they were firmly behind HBK, who targeted the left knee of Mankind in the early going. Mankind sold the effects well, at one point striking his knee to try and regain feeling. The men then ran through some of their signature spots, with Mankind crashing into the steps and later getting caught up in the ropes with a hangman, but managing to get out of it thanks to the mandible claw. From there came a spectacular mid-air counter from Shawn as he and Mankind went crashing through the announce table. After that, Michaels hit a very nice step-up super kick which looked to have got the win. However, Vader interfered for the DQ. Michaels got rid of Vader only to then eat a mandible claw, only for the Undertaker to appear and take out Mankind. Shawn then interacted with the fans and received congrats from the announcers, even though he only retained his title thanks to a DQ. The match itself was something special, as both wrestlers worked incredibly hard. However, the awkward ending took away from things.
I never really took exception to people who didn't appreciate it as much as they would have if there'd been a clean finish.
This was the only downside to what was otherwise one of WWF's strongest ever main events.
Looking back, I would have rather just done a clean finish. It's the best you could do for it.
Yes.
You can only do what's in your control.
The crowd in our next example was much less forgiving about a match that ended without a decisive winner, when Rey Mysterio defended the World Championship vs SABU at ECW One Night Stand 2006. The match was fast-paced and full of action, with several cool moments, such as when Mysterio hit a senton through a table. He attempted the move again, this time on a chair but missed, receiving a wicked chair shot instead. A tremendous springboard DDT through a table ended the match as the doctor deemed both Rey and Sabu unable to continue.
Look out! Oh my God! No, it's over!
The crowd were none too pleased with this and responded with bullshit chants. The WWE didn't want to beat either wrestler, which was the reason for the non-finish. Had either of the injuries been legit, it would have been a different story. Sure, the fans in the building still wouldn't have been happy, but at least then in hindsight, the finish wouldn't have been so silly, as a no contest of this nature in ECW of all places just doesn't make sense. A real injury affected the finish of our next match, when Brock Lesnar fought Kurt Angle for the WWE Championship at WrestleMania 19. The stakes going into the clash were huge, not just because of the title on the line, but also because Angle's neck was a ticking time bomb. He'd go in for surgery after the event, but for Kurt, it was key not to further aggravate the injury during the match. But as it turns out, it was Brock, not Angle, that left the arena in an ambulance. Kurt's bad neck wasn't going to stop him from pulling out all the stops, as he and Brock put on an absolute classic, in what was perhaps the greatest WrestleMania main event up until that point. The quality of the wrestling is well remembered by fans, but it's overshadowed by the closing stages of the bout, when Lesnar climbed to the top rope. Angle was way too far out for Brock to connect with whatever he had in mind, and that just so happened to be a shooting star press. In an all-time WrestleMania moment, Lesnar under-rotated, slamming his head into the mat as things came to a standstill. The epic conclusion to the biggest show of the year had been botched, with Lesnar suffering a concussion in the process.
What the hell's Lesnar doing, Cole? Oh my God!
Brock shook the cobwebs enough to deliver an F5 to get the win, but it was clear during the post-match that the lights were on in Lesnar's head, but there was no one home. The lasting impression of Angle and Lesnar's match will be Brock missing the shooting star, and despite the botch, Lesnar succeeded in creating a WrestleMania moment.
That spot made my match one of the most famous matches in WrestleMania. When fans remember you, even if it's for a botched spot, it's worth it.
Lesnar's Mania botch is remembered for the right reasons, but the same can't be said for the botch finish to Mickie James and Trish Stratus' match at WrestleMania 22. This match had been built up strongly on television, with Mickie playing the crazed, obsessed fan of Trish. Mickie was in love with Trish, but after being continuously rejected, James then made it her mission to destroy Stratus. The feud was to culminate at WrestleMania, where Trish went into the match as women's champion, a title she held for the previous 15 months. The fans cheered for Mickie during the match as she worked over the left leg of Trish, who in turn did an awesome job selling. Mickie countered a Stratusfaction attempt in unique fashion before posing to the camera.
Stratusfaction here. Oh, wait a minute. What the heck?
James then looked to a Stratusfaction of her own, but the women struggled to get up for the move, blowing the spot in the process.
Right out of my game, I'll tell you that. And whoa. James.
But there was no hiding the screw up. James then used her take on Trish's chick kick, aptly named the Mick kick, to get the win. The match is best remembered for Mickie's suggestive taunt to the camera that preceded the botched Stratus faction, both of which were edited out of all future versions of the match. Besides the botch finish, the match itself was very good, with Trish's selling being one of the highlights. The Chicago crowd also made their presence known as they were into the whole match. After Mickie came back through the curtain, she was confronted by Vince McMahon, who was livid over the hand gesture she made.
Vince is livid. You know, we're going to have to go back and edit this out. Do you know how much time and how much effort and how much money it's going to cost to do that just because you decided to do this?
This was one instance where the botched ending to a match wasn't even the main thing that had to subsequently be edited out. Our last match occurred in a place well known for its love of wrestling, which is almost the complete opposite of Sturgis, South Dakota, where WCW Hog Wild 1996 emanated from. WCW held annual events at the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally for several years, playing out to a full crowd of bikers revving their engines. The people in attendance clearly weren't wrestling fans, so it was going to be interesting to see how they reacted to a lengthy in-ring clinic between technicians Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko. The first part of the match was fantastic. There was some great wrestling that included a host of high-impact moves. Then the 20-minute time limit ran out just as Benoit kicked out of a powerbomb. Had this been the finish, it would have no doubt been better than what actually ended up happening, as the match then went into a 5-minute overtime. The problem was that by this point, things began to drag. The crowd had already been sat on their hands for a while. Nevertheless, the bout continued. However, by the end of the 5 minutes, there was still no winner. Referee Nick Patrick then declared there must be a winner, meaning the match went into a second overtime. The crowd made more noise booing this decision than they had for the entire match combined, as the people just wanted this to end.
The referee has declared another 5-minute overtime period.
The finish finally came off a distraction from Woman, allowing Benoit to schoolboy Malenko for the win. So after all that wrestling, the match ended with an interference and a roll-up. In front of a different crowd, this match would have gotten over far more than it did. The in-ring action was strong throughout, and multiple overtimes were a good idea in theory. They just played out to the wrong type of audience. The fans in Sturgis didn't care to see a winner between Benoit and Malenko, but it was a different story for the fans in Pittsburgh on the May 11, 2007 edition of SmackDown. The main event pitted World Heavyweight Champion The Undertaker against Batista in a cage match with the title on the line. Taker worked the previously injured right leg of Batista. This limited Batista's typical power-centric offense. This meant going for stuff we wouldn't usually see from the animal, such as a shoulder block from the top rope and a low blow. Unable to hit any of his usual moves or climb the cage, Batista limped to the door, but the dead man was in pursuit, going straight back to the leg. The animal later found himself on the top rope once again, and with a head start on Taker, Batista began to climb the cage, but the bad leg slowed him down, allowing the Phenom to catch up to the point where both men appeared to land on the floor below at the same time. Unable to determine who landed first, the referees went to the instant replay on the monitors to try and decide a winner, but even in slow motion, it looked as though Taker and Batista's feet both hit the ground at the same time. However, if you look closely during the side-by-side shots, The Undertaker lands while Batista is still holding onto the cage, yet to drop down, meaning technically, Taker should have won. Given that SmackDown was taped at the time, things were edited in a way so that Taker landing first wasn't too noticeable. Either way, the dead man retained his title since the match was declared a draw, and this decision was met with boos by the fans.
This match is a draw.
Taker and Batista put on a fine display. It was dramatic and featured superb selling and ring psychology. The match definitely deserved a winner, and while no one got their hand raised following the cage match, there was still more to come, as a bloody and battered Undertaker was attacked by Mark Henry, who left the dead man laying. This gave Edge the ultimate opportunity to cash in his Money in the Bank contract, hitting Taker with a spear to become the new World Heavyweight Champion.
That's sick piranha. Next world champion. Not this way. Not this way.
The ending to the cage match may have fallen flat, but the draw was done so that Batista didn't get beat and still had a legit reason to challenge for the title again after the fact. Meanwhile, the closing angle was done to write Undertaker off television, as he'd previously torn his bicep tendon and needed surgery. We go from a rarely seen finish in Batista and Taker's match to a rarely seen match type, that being the Championship Scramble. This went down at Unforgiven 2008 and saw Triple H defend the WWE Championship against Jeff Hardy, Shelton Benjamin, the Brian Kendrick, and MVP. The match had a 20-minute time limit where 2 superstars would start, then every 5 minutes another would enter. Pinfalls and submissions were unlimited, and whoever scored the most recent fall by the end of the 20 minutes would be declared the winner and official WWE champion. The rules of the match meant that we saw a number of temporary WWE champions due to the frequent amount of pinfalls. This kept up the suspense, which began to amp up even more as the clock ran down to 0. With 2 minutes remaining, Jeff Hardy was the current WWE champion. Then with just 10 seconds to spare, Triple H hit the pedigree on MVP and went for the cover. Jeff, instead of breaking up the game's pin, went for a cover of his own. This made no sense since Jeff was already the current title holder. Jeff's timing was off, as it looked like he was supposed to sell the effects of hitting the Swanton Bomb for an extended period and then ultimately come up short in breaking up Triple H's pin attempt. But because Jeff was already back to his feet by the time Hunter went for the pin, Hardy appeared to just say screw it and went to cover Shelton.
It's almost over. Look at this.
This would have been one hell of a finish had things just gone to plan, but because of the botch, it just made Jeff look stupid. Despite this, the match was still exciting, and the scramble concept made for a thoroughly entertaining contest. For our next entry, Triple H would this time be defending the World Heavyweight Championship to take on Randy Orton at the 2005 Royal Rumble. The match started off well with Triple H focusing his attack on Orton's left knee, continuously going after the knee with each offensive move. Orton in turn did a great job selling. However, as the match continued, Orton stopped selling the knee, going as far as to hit a crossbody from the top rope with no issue. Orton then began to sell the effects of a concussion after the game countered a DDT. Following a ref bump, Triple H switched focus to Orton's now injured head, attempting to use the sledgehammer only for Randy to block it. Orton would then grab the sledgehammer to use for himself, but was stopped by a clothesline. One pedigree later, and Triple H retained the World Heavyweight title. The story of the match was a bit disjointed since Orton went from selling his knee to selling a concussion. This meant the early part of the match was all for nothing, since the injured knee was completely forgotten about halfway through. The finish also didn't do Orton any favors since he was beaten cleanly after trying to use a weapon on a heel. This match was the final nail in the coffin for Randy's poor babyface run. It's true he wasn't ready for the main event at this time, but the way he was booked certainly didn't help, and the conclusion to this match was proof. Our last two examples will look at how another wrestler's interference can overshadow the good work those in the match had just done. First, we go to the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view from 2014, where Dean Ambrose battled Seth Rollins inside Hell in a Cell. This matchup was significant as it was the first time two wrestlers in their 20s main evented a pay-per-view in a one-on-one encounter since Undertaker and Yokozuna fought at the 1994 Survivor Series. The match began on top of the cell, with Ambrose attacking Seth's managers Jamie Noble and Joey Mercury with a kendo stick. Rollins quickly jumped Dean from behind, leading to a 3-on-1 assault. Eventually, Ambrose fought back, leading to him and Rollins being positioned halfway up the cell as they hung off the side. A headbutt from Ambrose resulted in both men crashing through the announce tables below, making for a truly epic moment. It looked like the two wrestlers were going to be carted away on stretchers, but spurred on by the crowd, Ambrose leaped off the gurney and went right back to attacking Rollins.
It's fighting out of this gurney. Step to that stretcher, that gurney.
With the cell door now locked, it was time for the bell to ring as the match officially began. There were some nice spots featuring various weapons such as chairs and tables. Then as Ambrose was about to stomp Rollins' head through the cinder blocks, Bray Wyatt ran in and attacked Dean. Wyatt hit Ambrose with the Uranagi, allowing Rollins to crawl into the cover to get the win. The crowd, who had been hot for the entire match, were now completely silent.
Has now covered Dean Ambrose, and Seth Rollins has beaten Dean Ambrose.
Wyatt's interference completely took the air out of the building. Rollins and Ambrose had such a great feud, it deserved to have a decisive ending. It was a shame that such a fun match had to be ruined in the closing stages. It didn't even take a finishing move to defeat Ambrose, as Wyatt saved the Sister Abigail until after the match, as the show went off the air in disappointing fashion. Ambrose and Wyatt went on to work a lousy program against each other that saw Ambrose lose much of the momentum he had built up during the feud with Seth Rollins. No one wanted to see Bray Wyatt spoil the ending to Ambrose and Rollins' feud, much like no one wanted to see Alberto Del Rio shoehorned into John Cena and CM Punk's classic program in 2011. After a sensational bout at Money in the Bank, Punk and Cena followed things up at SummerSlam, where the undisputed WWE Championship was on the line, in a match that also featured Triple H as a special referee. Triple H could have counted out Punk and Cena at one point, but instead he threw the men back into the ring. Cena had his working shoes on for this match as he dug deep into his arsenal, hitting a drop kick, an emerald flosion, and a cross-face version of the STF. Punk later hit the GTS before hooking the leg. Cena got his foot on the rope, but the game didn't see this and thus counted the 3. The actual finish of the match was fine compared to what transpired afterward, as Punk would be attacked by Kevin Nash of all people, with Kev laying out the new undisputed champion thanks to a powerbomb. From there, Alberto Del Rio ran down to cash in his Money in the Bank contract. The cash-in proved successful as Del Rio pinned Punk to capture the WWE Championship. It was a finish the fans just did not want to see. This was one way to cool off a red-hot CM Punk at the time. It was an overall terrible ending to a great pay-per-view. And that brings us to the end of this video. As always, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. And if you like this one, be sure to check out our video on 10 wrestlers surprisingly booed in their hometown. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.